اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Okay. So welcome back. Eid Mubarak. May Allah accept your fasts. Inshallah, everybody was fasting on Arafah. And may Allah accept your celebration of Eid. Celebrating Eid itself is an act of worship. Right? So, تقبل الله منكم الطاعات. So inshallah today we are going on to zakah. So this is lesson 7 of 12. And what does zakah or zakat mean? It means in Arabic, originally the word, it means purity. It means growth. It means praise. It means barakah. It means another meaning as well, if it evades me now. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he spoke and revealed the Quran to the Arabs, he said, give purity. He didn't say give charity. He said give purity. Give growth. Give praise. I.e. give something that will be the means for you to be pure in this life, and for your money to increase in this life, and for you to be praised in this life and then in the next. Right? So that's the concept of zakah, is that you have excess, right? Something that is growing, and so how are you going to purify your wealth and make it grow and make it praiseworthy? By what? By giving to the poor, giving their due to the poor, the alms. Okay, and so zakah is very different to sadaqah. Sadaqah is you doing somebody else a favor, and you have a reward for that. Zakah is you giving somebody, a stakeholder, giving somebody who has shares in your company. Okay, somebody who has shares in your company, right? So the poor have a share of your wealth. That's the idea of zakah, right? And so it's not communism, not socialism, but it's leaning that direction to some extent. Okay, so we have zakah. So our author, may Allah show him tremendous mercy, he says zakah is the fourth pillar of Islam, i.e. Islam depends on these things. Therefore, every Muslim must know the type of possessions upon which it is compulsory, i.e. do you give zakat for any and every type of wealth? The answer is no. So it says, these are, i.e. the only type of wealth that you pay zakat on are the following: livestock, right, and that's specific livestock, gold and silver and their monetary equivalents, right? So that means dollars, yen, Swiss francs, whatever it is you have. Bitcoins, right? If anything that is internationally accepted as money, we will say how much gold could you buy with these bitcoins, right? Does anybody here deal in bitcoins? Does anybody know can you buy gold with bitcoins? Has anybody tried to do that? Right? You're trying to buy. Can somebody Google it for us? Buy gold for bitcoins, and see what the exchange rate is. How much does it cost? Gold bullion, for example, right? How much does it cost for a gram of gold or an ounce of gold? Because that's what we're going to do, practically speaking. If you have cryptocurrency, not any cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency, because it's important to understand that before we get involved in cryptocurrency, you've got to find out the fundamental issue with cryptocurrency is it money or is it not money? Right? Is it money or is it not currency? Does it have international currency or not? Right? So to my understanding, I'm not giving fatwa, to my understanding, the Bitcoin now has become something that is internationally recognized. You will pay taxes on Bitcoin. You will, you know, transferring Bitcoin is something that, again, the governments are going to monitor and see what's going on because it's actually considered wealth. As opposed to certain other cryptocurrencies, they're just made up, right? They don't mean anything, right? So if, for example, myself and Imran right now invented a cryptocurrency, and Yahya is willing to give some gold for it, that doesn't mean that we have to pay zakat on it, because it's not internationally accepted. So that is the fundamental concept of cryptocurrency, something made up, right? The issue is when it becomes actual currency. People want it. It is actually it has تتحقق فيه. Right, so Amir, I don't want to know in dollars. Okay, I don't want to know in dollars. I want to know, can you find any websites that sell gold for Bitcoin? Right, just like you can buy gold for dollars, right? You go and say, I want gold. Great, can you send it to us, please? Right, so this is what we mean by a monetary equivalent. Swiss francs equals a certain amount of gold and equals a certain amount of silver. American dollars equal a certain amount of gold, a certain amount of silver, right? The French franc, what does it equal now? Who knows what the French franc was? You should be able to paste the link, yeah. Right, the French franc doesn't exist anymore. It got cancelled, and now we have the euro in its place, right? So there's something that doesn't exist anymore, right? It does not equal any gold or silver, okay? So this is what we're talking about. Something that has monetary equivalence, okay? So anything, right? Anything, so a cryptocurrency, so when we say with cryptocurrency, when we're saying it's haram to deal in cryptocurrency, we're saying because it's not actually money. So you cannot come up Imran and I cannot just create some money right now. It's called Imran dollars. And I'm going to start selling them now. You can't do that. Right? You can't do that because it's not money. But if we started doing it, and then eventually there was international recognition for these things, right? Jazakumullah khair, Shahid, right? Then you could. So originally it would be haram what we're doing because you're selling something that's not money. You can't sell nothing. You're not allowed to sell nothing. It's haram. And there would be no zakat in it. And eventually it would be halal to trade in it, and there would be zakat that's due on it, right? So as a loose kind of like as a loose kind of criterion, if you have to pay tax on it, you're going to have to pay zakat on it, as a loose kind of definition, right? So we have livestock, we have gold and silver, trade goods, anything you buy with the intention to sell. So you bought it with the intention to sell. Right? Buried treasure, so money that you just dig up, ancient, pre-Islamic, whatever it is, ancient gold from 2,000 years ago, something like that. Gold and silver mines, so you mine gold or you mine silver, right? What else? And main staple crops, right? Which are seed crops and dates and grapes, right? So we're talking about main staple, things that people eat as a main staple, right? Wheat, rice, right? Potatoes, main staple, right? Corn, right? Maize, these are main staple things. Right? And dates specifically and grapes specifically, no other vegetable, no other fruit. There's no zakat on animals other than livestock, and these are very specific livestock, grazing on open, unowned land. So what do we mean by livestock? We specifically mean the following things. Cows, I'm not sure if we're going to mention it in a second. No, it's going to come later on. So when we say livestock, we specifically mean sheep and goats. We specifically mean cattle. And we specifically mean camels only. There is no zakat on chickens. There's no zakat on, I don't know, what else you might breed? Geese. There's no zakat on, so poultry, nothing there. There's no zakat on what? What else might you breed? Llamas, right? Llamas is an issue because they are in the camelid family, so it's possible that maybe a modern mufti might look at it as a camel, Allahu A'lam. But otherwise, there's no zakat on. There's no zakat on horses, right? So if you own 10 thoroughbred horses that are each worth $50,000, there's no zakat on it. Right? You just have, mashallah, you have beautiful horses that you own, and you're a wealthy person, you have a beautiful ranch that you live on, a wonderful kind of house, and you have these amazing horses, and there's no zakat that you pay on horses. There's no zakat you pay on, I don't know what other animals, an amazing bird of prey, a savannah cat that's worth, I don't know, $50,000 or something like that, I don't know, right? A lion, you don't pay zakat on a lion. So we're not looking at wealth or assets, we're looking at specific assets. We're looking at specifically goats and sheep, specifically cattle, meaning right, cows, and what's it called? Would included in cows would be what's it called? Water buffaloes and the like. And camels, specifically, no other animal. Specifically gold and silver. Specifically money that can convert into gold and silver. Specifically trade goods, things that you bought to sell. Anything that you bought to sell or you bought to rent out, there's going to be zakat is due on it. Right, buried treasure, gold, silver we mentioned. What else? We said specific, so there's no zakat on animals other than livestock grazing on open land. So again, if you go beehives, there's no zakat on it. So I believe in the Hanbali school, Shaheed, I believe there are for bees and beehives and other, for example, things like olive trees and stuff like that, there are certain things in other schools, right? And so it's worth maybe, looking around. If you have these things and they are major income for you, it might be worth looking into as a way of being precautious. But in the Shafi'i school, there is no zakat on it, right? So if you invested $500,000 into beehives and you have a bee company, you don't pay zakat on the honey and you don't pay zakat on the beehives. You don't pay zakat on these things. You pay zakat on what? On the money that you save. So if you, mashallah, you're making a lot of money and you have a lot of cash, right, sitting around, or gold sitting around, or silver sitting around, then you're going to be paying zakat on that. But you're not paying zakat on this thing that makes you money itself. And so what did we say? We said, so take yourself. So what does unopened land mean? It means it's slightly different to the modern paradigm, right? Slightly different to modern paradigm. So if you can imagine, you go 100 years ago, Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans control whole area of the Muslim countries, or the people control these areas, but there's a lot of just open land that people don't even use. It's not owned by anybody, right? It's not owned by anybody. It's not like this land here and this land there. No, it's just open. And so you take your sheep out and you eat the grass and that's it. Nobody owns that land. Okay, so what if somebody owns a land? Shaheed has all this land and it's all his, and I have to pay him a fee in order to take my sheep out there. Then there's no zakat is due, right? Unless it's a very negligible fee, $1 a year or something like that, right? But if it's going to be significant, there's no zakat, because again, the whole idea is growth. You have something that's just growing, right? This thing is just growing. There's grass and you just go and eat it, and that's it, right? Similarly, if they're working animals, right? You have bulls that, for example, for transporting, camels for transporting, right? The camels used for the Silk Road, right? There's no zakat on these animals because these are labor animals, right? Plow horses, for example, there's no zakat on a plow horse. There's no zakat on horses to begin with. So anything that's a working animal, there's no zakat on it. So again, what if once you rode your cow, you don't pay zakat on it? No, what we're talking about is what's significant, right? Is it used in a significant way to work, for example? Okay, so if there's no zakat on animals other than livestock grazing on open, unowned land. Right? If one purchased electronics and built a program finished product for resale, does one pay zakat on their proceeds? That's a complex question. I can't remember the answer now. So what you do is you buy parts and you make something and you sell. So you are not buying those parts for resale. You are buying those parts to put together to make something else, right? So I don't remember the answer. Inshallah, I'll try and research it, but I don't remember the answer. I remember going through that some time ago, but I don't remember now. Because that's actually quite practical, because again, that's in the what we call the tertiary sector, right? So services, let's say most of us, most in the developed world, most of our businesses are in the tertiary sector, right? We're doing services. So there's no zakat on that. Right? Most of the time there's no zakat on these things. There's zakat on the money that you accrue and save. That's all. Right? But when you're in the secondary sector, right, you are buying something. For example, you buy flour and you make cakes. Right? You buy eggs and you make cakes. You're not buying eggs to sell eggs. Right? And so I don't remember the answer there. How does it work exactly? And so I will, inshallah, research it, inshallah, and I'll either answer it next week in the class or in the forum, inshallah. Okay, so a precondition of the zakat becoming obligatory is the passing of a lunar year, which is also a condition for money and trade goods. So the default is there's no zakat is due unless you have had that type of wealth for a whole year. That's the default. There are some exceptions, namely harvest. So imagine, for example, a crop that harvests twice a year, right? So you're going to pay zakat on this whenever the harvest is due. So potatoes are ripe and that's it. Whenever the potatoes are ripe and you harvest the potatoes, you're going to pay zakat, right? Whenever you, whatever it is that you do, right? So it's not an issue of how long you've had those grains for. It's as soon as the harvest time comes in, you're going to give a certain amount to the poor. Okay, another condition is that they reach the zakat minimum. Exactly, Imran. So what if you've only harvested 10 potatoes or less? Right? Exactly the question. What if you only have one sheep? What if you only have $1? What if you only have 10 potatoes? Right? Well, how much zakat do you pay on that? You don't pay zakat. That's the answer. Because there was something called a nisab, a zakat minimum. If you do not reach that, you don't pay anything. Simple as that. Like tax, right? You don't earn enough to pay tax, right? Same thing. So another condition is that they reach the zakat minimum. So every single type of wealth has a zakat minimum, right? A zakat minimum. How do you find that out? The nisab, we're not going to mention it here, but for generally for, we can just mention for savings and stock, right, that you're selling, is it is about $400, right? I can send you the exact amount, but it's about $400, right? Maybe a bit more than that, maybe like $600, right? So basically, if you have $100 in your bank account for the whole year, or you live month by month, right? You make 10K a month and you spend 10K a month. You don't pay zakat because you don't have any savings, right? Like someone paying off their house, for example, right? They don't have savings like that. So that if they don't accrue, if at the end of the month, let's say for example, at the end of the month they're just going to pay off their credit card bills or whatever it is, and that's it. They don't pay zakat because they don't have savings. Okay. It's only savings. Yes, it is only savings. So if Yahya, for example, makes $5,000 a month, and he spends $4,000 a month, and every month he saves $1,000, and every 6 months he spends this on something. Holiday, umrah, whatever it is, then you don't pay any zakat because you do not have any savings. You have not saved anything over the 12 years, the 12 months. Over the 12 lunar months, that you've not saved anything. So from Ramadan to Ramadan, from Muharram to Muharram, whenever it is that you first have that minimum amount. So I give $1,000 to Yahya. He spends it, gets another $2,000, spends it, gets $3,000, spends it, gets $10,000, spends it. It's like, there's no point where he has a minimum of $600 or more throughout the whole year, right? Like many people, month by month, right? There's no zakat, right? Khair. Right, so another condition is that they reach the zakat minimum. Similarly, Imran has decided to invest in potato growing, and he in the back garden makes potatoes. It's not going to be enough, right? He's got 10 potatoes, 20 potatoes, 100 potatoes. It's not going to be enough. It's going to be a bag of potatoes, 2 bags of potatoes. It's not going to be enough, right? We're talking about something that's like half a ton of wheat, something like that. That kind of amount. Right, you are a farmer, right? You actually like harvest serious amounts of wheat. But if you don't, then there's no zakat. You have a couple of sheep in your back garden, right? That's not what we're talking about, right? Khair. Now, importantly, so here's a question for Yahya. So alhamdulillah, I'm a doctor, right? And I make 25k a month. And I spend probably about $2,000 a month on restaurants. Take a good number of holidays a year. At the end of the year, I have no money because I'm living the high life, right? Do I pay any zakat? No zakat, right? Is Allah going to ask me on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking me on Yawm al-Qiyamah what I did with my money? Yeah. So just because you technically will not have to pay zakat, it doesn't mean your responsibility towards the poor of the world and towards yourself, let alone the poor of the world, is fulfilled. It's two different things. We're talking about technically. If you imagine, for example, this course would be given to you to fulfill your tax, basically, and to the inland revenue, we call it in England, or whatever it called, the IRS, right, in America, where it's like, okay, how do we collect zakat? Okay, so and so, so and so, so and so. It's a technical system, right? The spirit of it is purify your wealth and give to the poor. Think about other people. That's the spirit of it. The technicality is, well, sometimes you don't actually have to do that, because if you just spend it all, you won't have to do anything, right? Invest in thoroughbred horses and you'll be fine. So the point is, when we talk about fiqh, the fiqh cannot always, the system that is there cannot always reflect the spirit of the deen. Like, I can tell you, make sure you pause in sujood, but I can't tell you, make sure you focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the whole point. Why is it that when you go into sujood and you don't pause, it doesn't count? Because obviously you're not focusing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are you? You're not focusing enough. But I can't deal with that as a faqih in a fiqh class. I can't deal with how much presence of heart you have in your sujood, or how much abstinence you have from the dunya. All I can deal is, do you have this many camels or that many camels? That's what we're dealing with, right? And so it's important to understand that just because you don't pay zakat doesn't mean you're not responsible Yawm al-Qiyamah. Because you'll be like, okay, how do you live your life? Oh, an American, So a poor American is living the high life, right? You have electricity, subhanallah. You have a house, subhanallah. You have this, you have that, right? Not all Americans, but I'm saying, I'm here in California, Yahya's here in California. It's like, this is one of the wealthiest places on the face of the earth, right? And so, we have to make sure that we always have that question: are we wasting our money? Are we, So there's nothing wrong with going to a restaurant. There's nothing wrong with going to Barbados. There's nothing wrong with to spending Allah's money on things that are halal and enjoying yourself is fine. But the question is, did you waste that money or not? Is it ridiculous? So obviously, if it's something haram, it's obviously a waste of money, and that's obvious. But the case is, what if you just just want to buy a Tesla? Just want to buy a second Mercedes? What's wrong with that? Like, I like Mercedes, a nice car. I like to have two. So you're not going to pay zakat on your Mercedes, right? You're not going to pay zakat on your Mercedes, but did you need that? On Yawm al-Qiyamah, do you have an answer for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala why you have a second Mercedes? Or why you have the first one? Right? So I'm not saying it's haram to have a Mercedes. I'm saying we have to prepare a answer, right? Every single thing, why do we have those things? What's it doing in our life, right? What's it doing in our life? And so we look at the Salaf. Some of them were very wealthy, some of them were very poor, right? Some of them very wealthy, some of them very poor. That means there's nothing wrong with being wealthy, nothing wrong with being poor. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you're close to Allah. Just because you're wealthy doesn't mean, but it means the wealthy person has more answers to give. That's the issue, right? You've got more things to talk about, right? And the default is, for most people this is impossible. The default is the believer lives a life where he is working part-time and worshipping and studying and serving the community. That's how it is. So the 9 to 5, the classic 9 to 5, the system where we are 9 to 5 and a slave to the system, this is not an Islamic system. It's not ideal at all. So if there's any way we can set ourselves free of that system, it's very good. Right? It's a good idea, right? Because and doing something that is useful. So either you do a 9 to 5 that is useful for the ummah and useful for your own deen, or whatever it is you're trying to serve the community, serve the Muslims, serve the world, however it is you're trying to do, fulfill a community obligation, like being a doctor, these kind of things. But how useful is it, for example, that you are a outreach manager for a huge clothes company? How useful is that? Like, do they honestly need to sell more trainers and more shoes or whatever you want, tennis shoes, whatever? Do they honestly need to do that? Is that fulfilling like a world need, or is it just, well, I bought a house now and I got to pay it off, so now I better start working 9 to 5, in fact not 9 to 5 but 9 till 9 to make sure I get this paid off, right? So the rat race, right? The rat race is not ideal, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say go and earn tons of money so that you pay zakat, right? It's a good idea, particularly in today's world, to earn lots of money and do lots of good things. I'm not saying don't earn lots of money, but the question is why? Why are you working so much? What are you spending your money on? And so I know with myself, often it's the case. It's a circular thing. Well, you want to do more dunya, so then you work more, so then you have less time, and you just kind of set your own standards. So do you have to live in a house? Can't you live in a yurt? Right? Serious question, right? Oh, I have to live in a house. Why do you have to live in a house? Why do you have to have a car? Right, can you explain why is there a feeling of guilt when a large sum of money is spent on leisure or something along those lines? Example, working all year and then taking a 2-week vacation in exotic island, right? So the question of guilt sometimes is wrong and sometimes is right. Okay, it's wrong when you genuinely see this is what I need to do. I need to be away from the whole world for 2 weeks in order for me to survive, right? I've been in that scenarios, right? Where you're like stressed, right? I can't, like your body is aching, you have pain in your shoulders, pain in your arms, you're really stressed, like you need to go and do nothing, right? But then the question is, did you need this? So when is the guilt? So that kind of guilt, oh, I feel guilty. No, don't feel guilty. You have an intention, it's an act of worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you, Yawm al-Qiyamah, why did you spend that much money to go on holiday and do nothing? Oh, I needed it. My wife and I needed it. We needed time together to just talk about stuff and chill, right? Okay, you have an intention, or you're trying to save a marriage, you're trying to save your sanity, you're trying to just relax, it's a thing you need. There's nothing wrong with things like that. But the question is, you have an answer for it. Why are you doing that? Now the issue is, you just spent $40 $400 at a restaurant. So how many people can eat with $40? How many people eat with $400? So did you have to spend $400 at a restaurant? Was that really necessary? Right? Particularly, again, think about where a lot of the Muslims are living in the third world, where $1 can feed somebody for a day. So the painful question we have to ask each other is, when you go and buy a burger for $10, like, it's not enough. It's just about enough to feed you for a day, but what could you have done with that? Is it necessary or not? The question is, I'm not saying good or bad, I'm saying we have to think about these things. So we have a healthy relationship with money as long as we're asking why, what is my intention in doing this, right? And it's important for our family as well, right? So Imam Ramli, he says that, for example, children should be trained on a regular basis to eat just bread and water now and then. Once a week, bread and water, right? So I'm not saying go and feed your kids bread and water, but the idea that, for example, they grow up, we can have whatever we want. Go to the store, whatever you want. Like, that's not how, that's not how I grew up. That's not how, that's a ruining a child. So if you're literally doing that, there's a problem, right? That's a problem. Or the idea that, I know, for example, myself growing up, we couldn't just eat and drink anything in the house. There was a rationing on milk, rationing on juice, rationing on all sorts of things, right? If you're thirsty, go and drink water, right? But the idea that, for example, you can just have whatever you want, whenever you want, and I'm thirsty, therefore I can have soda, therefore I'm going to have these different things. Like, it's extravagance, right? So we just have to be careful. I'm not saying it's halal and haram, and the Sharia doesn't. It says, it puts a certain limit on certain things, and everything else is down to your discretion, and you're standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al-Qiyam saying, was I being extravagant or not? Was I being wasteful or not? Did I have a valid reason or not? Right? May Allah protect us all. Does that help, Yahya? For me personally, if you gave me a whole lot of money, what would I do with it? Exactly. Buy books, right? That's my dunya. Right? That's my dunya, right? Is buy books. I just buy tons of books all the time. Like right now, I've got my cart, go on my website, it's like $1,000 in books I want to buy, right? That's what I do. Buy books and buy bookshelves, and buy books and buy bookshelves. That's what I do. Or travel to Muslim countries to meet scholars. That's what I do. That would be my dunya, right? And for me, I'd be like, great, my dunya is something that's useful, right? Your dunya could be, for example, I like people. Okay, go and help people then. Go and build orphanages in Kenya. I like animals. Go to Kenya. Fantastic place. Go and build orphanages. Go and, I like electronics. Okay, go and find electronic problems for the Muslim world. Do something. So what we can do, there's ways to get around it, where you say, you want to do something? Yeah, do it in a useful way. That's why the Prophet �ﷺ said, every single thing that you muck around doing as a game is batil, is false, it's useless. Apart from what? Apart from training your bow. You like shooting things? Go and shoot. It's fun. Go and do it. And training your horse. You like animals? I love animals. Okay, go and train your horse. Right? And mucking around with your family. You like family? Yeah, go and do it. Go and do stupid things with your kids. They'll love it. And they'll grow up loving Islam because they know that daddy existed. Right? They drew all over your face. Mucking around with your family. Spending time with your family. With your wife, for example. It's fine. So these are things that you can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say don't have a nafs and don't have personal inclinations, but use it in something constructive, right? And so again, because we live in the West and there's like just, this crazy thing of just buy. It's very, very easy to slip into this culture of consumerism, which is completely like, we have to be a bit like the Mormons, right? I don't know if in England we know about the Mormons, but that kind of way, like live a bit of an austere life, and it's useful to go and look the Muslim world. Go for example to a place, Yemen, Mauritania, see how they live, see how their ulama live, and it's like they live very, very austere lives. They don't have anything, their food is extremely simple, and they're very happy like that. Right? And it's just a reference point. Allah. Anyway, that's those things. Khair. Okay, so the amount that has to be paid on money and trade goods is 2.5%, i.e. 1/40th. So you've saved, at the end of the year, you have had in your bank account, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, 40k, right, $40,000, 40,000 pounds, what do you pay? 1,000 pounds, $1,000, right? Your Bitcoin, your trade goods, so you buy and sell used cars, okay, your inventory, so between the cash that you have and the cars that you're buying and selling, what was your inventory and cash throughout the whole year? Okay, well, I had at least 100 cars there, right? So throughout the whole year, you have what is your value? $200,000, $500,000, $1 million, 1/40th of that, right? So whatever you have so what you're going to do then is, if you are involved in trade, buying and selling, you're going to add that, your inventory, to your yearly savings, and you're going to pay zakat on that. Okay? Does that make sense? And so with inventory, you just look at the end of the year. But with your money, you look at throughout the year. So what was the minimum you had? You had 40,000 beginning of the year, 60,000 at the end of the year, but it went down to 5,000 in the middle of the year. You're only going to pay zakat on 5,000 because you only had 5,000 for the whole year. So then you're going to take your 5,000. So we said you have 40,000 at the beginning of the year. I was just drawing with my fingers here. 60,000 at the end of the year, but in the middle of the year you went down to 5,000 or 0. If you went down to 0, no zakat. 5,000, pay zakat on 5,000, that's it. The minimum that you had for the whole year. That's with your savings. With your trade goods, we just look at the end of the year. Right, the end of the year, right now, what's your assets? My assets are $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, right? $1 million, whatever it is, you're going to pay zakat on that. Okay. So it's quite easy in the Shafi'i school not to pay zakat. I've only paid zakat in my life once. Right? It's quite easy because most of the time live month by month, and that's it, right? You don't have savings, and that's it. You could be wealthy in that you have, oh, mashallah, my parents are landowners. Okay, but you don't pay zakat on land. So Shahid says, if you have more than the nisab in your bank for the year, would you minus your monthly outgoings before you calculate? No, you wouldn't. You just look at the money that's there, that's it. So in the Shafi'i school, it's possible to pay zakat even though you're a zakat recipient, right? So I borrow, for example, right, it's not of debt. I borrow $2 million from Amir, okay? And it's due immediately, right? Or it's due right now. I owe him $2 million, okay? And it's due right now, okay? I have $1 million in my bank account. So I've had that. Since he gave it to me, he gave me 2 million. I have spent 1 million. So I have had $1 million at least for the whole year. The other million I spent. So I'm going to pay zakat on the 1 million that I have. And I'm also going to receive zakat because I'm not able to pay my debt back. So you're paying zakat and receiving zakat at the same time. Because we're looking at the money. What money is there? Right? Similarly, I am I could be a zakat recipient as a debtor, right? But pay zakat, for example, on my sheep, right? So I could both give and receive at the same time, if that makes sense. So we're looking at just the money that is there. There is some money that's there, and you just have to pay from that. A farmer, same thing. The farm, you borrowed money to start your farm. You're in debt, yeah, but you've just harvested fruits. So what do? You're going to give zakat on the harvest, and you're going to receive zakat in money because you're a zakat recipient. Does that make sense, Shahid? Should we take student loans into account? No. So in the Shafi'i school, we do not look at debts. So if you are in debt, it doesn't take anything away. So the fact that you are in debt doesn't mean anything. So you have $40,000, but you owe $100,000. I mean, you pay zakat on $40,000. That's the Shafi'i school. Now in the Hanafi school, they do. So the Hanafi school, what they will say is you have $40,000, but you owe $100,000. So you're basically in the red. Right? So in the Shafi'i school, the jadid in the Shafi'i school is that we don't look at that. Right? So if you're in a predicament, you're like, oh my God, this is very difficult if you ask me to pay, and even though I have to pay, then fine, you can follow the Hanafi school, it's not a problem. But the Shafi'i school is that we look at the money. There is money there. We're not looking at you. We're not looking at you as a debtor. We're looking at the money. The money is there. The poor have a right to it. Simple as that. Okay. So what if you don't receive zakat, even if you're a recipient? Then it's too bad. That's all. Like Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i was from Ahl Bayt, right? He's from the family of the Prophet. The family of the Prophet, they don't receive zakat, right? But what did they receive? They received war booty, right? So he's in the time of the early Abbasid period when there's expansion and there's lots of money coming in from jihad, etc. And he didn't receive anything. Right? So how much should be received? The amount that you need. So you owe $100,000 and you can't pay it back. You should be given $100,000. That's how it should work. You cannot afford to pay your rent. You're given enough money to pay your rent. You cannot pay the rent or buy food. You're given enough money to pay the rent and buy food. Right? Okay. So it says the amount that has to be paid on money and trade goods is 2.5%, 1/40th. On crops and fruits grown by irrigation, the zakat is 5%, 1/20th. If the land is not irrigated, it is 10%, i.e. 1/10th. Right? So there's more on crops. Right? So what's going to happen is you have, for example, a vineyard. Right? You have all these grapes, and at the end of the year, when you harvest the grapes, you're going to give one. If it's irrigating and you're paying for water, then it's going to pay 1/5, 5%. Otherwise, if it rains, there's enough rain or there's enough water or whatever it is coming in, then it's 10%. Okay, same thing with potatoes, whatever, any other main staple. So dates specifically, grapes specifically, and then main staples. Can you pay the zakat of your own money to anyone who needs it, or do you have to give it to the masjid? Basically, who do you give the zakat directly to? You give it, so you can give it to the masjid or you can give it yourself, whatever you want. So the masjid it doesn't mean anything. There's no such thing as a church, right? There's no such thing as a clergy. We don't have clergy or a church or anything like that. A masjid is just a piece of land that is made an endowment. It is not an organization. Right? There's no such thing as that doesn't exist, right? And so when you give zakat to the mosque, it's like giving it to me and saying, please, Farid, give it to so and so. So zakat is just like paying your rent. Can you pay your rent through an app? Yeah. Could you pay the rent through your credit card? Yeah. Through a debit card? Yeah. So what is a debit card? It's just a transfer system, right? That's what a debit card is, a transfer system. It's like Western Union. Slightly different, but it's basically the same thing. It's like you're paying so-and-so who pays so-and-so who pays so-and-so. It goes around in circles, right? And so zakat is the same thing. If you were to pay zakat with your debit card to, let's say for example, Imran needs to receive zakat and you use your debit card to send him money, what happens is his bank charges you and your charges your bank, and then they give it to him as debit. So it's the same thing as give it to the bank, to the masjid. Masjid is a middleman. The debit card company is a middleman. I'm a middleman, right? So the masjid, it doesn't mean anything. It's just what's called a wakil, an agent. It doesn't have any religious significance, right? So you either carefully find somebody who's a zakat eligible person yourself, Or you give it to the masjid, trusting that they know who to give it to, or you give it to me, trusting that I know, or to Umar, or to Nadir, or whoever it is, right? But you need, just like it's rent, zakat is just like rent. You need to make sure that money gets to that person. Imagine again, Nadir is renting my house, and I understand, so I'm going to Hawaii for 2 years, please pay the money into this bank account. He can't find the bank details, doesn't know what's going on, so he just gives the money to charity. And I'm like, Nadir, what's your problem? I told you you have to pay rent on the first of the month, and because I'm not here, I want you to pay into my bank account. And you agreed. Like, why are you putting money in charity? I'm not charity. And so zakat is not charity. Zakat is somebody's money. It's their money. It's theirs. So you have to make sure it goes to them. Right? You can't just kind of like. So you need to make sure. Okay, you go to the masjid and say, masjid, can you? Who distributes your money? Oh, Mufti so and so. Okay, alhamdulillah. Or brother so and so. Who's brother so and so? So if you know that the way your masjid works is a very organized, systematic, they follow the form of madhahib, it's all great and legit, fine. But if you go to them and they're like, no, we just do fi sabilillah. What do you mean fi sabilillah? What's going on? You have to push, because this is a financial right that you're responsible to give. Just like as if Umar gave Nadir some money to give to me. Umar was like, oh, free, Nadir, you're going to Brentwood in California? Yeah. Can you give free this money? He's like, oh yeah. Where does he live? I don't know. Nadir's like, oh, I'll just give it to anybody in California. He's like, what are you doing? Like, this is his money, right? I bought something from him and I'm giving it to you to give to him. You can't just do whatever you want, right? So zakat is not charity. Zakat is not, it's somebody's money, has to go to that person. So either you rely on a mosque, you rely on a religious person, you rely on a scholar, you rely on a trustworthy friend, you rely on something, right? And the best thing to do really is what? The best thing to do really is find a family member that you are not responsible to support. For example, in the Shafi'i school, you're not responsible to support your brother or your sister, right? Unless your parents have to support them and your parents are poor. So if your dad, for example, is poor and he's supporting your little brother, then you do have to support your brother. But normally, let's say, for example, your parents have died, you're 40 years old, your older brother is 50 years old, and he's going through financial difficulty, give him your zakat. Fantastic. You know exactly where it's going and you know the whole story and everything. And it's preferred to give zakat to family member. It's more important. And it's preferred to give it to your husband, right? So again, COVID-19, your husband's lost his job. Give your zakat to your husband. Fantastic. You know exactly what's going on, right? Okay. So zakat al-fitr is zakat paid on Eid. Eid al-fitr has to be paid by every Muslim who possesses more than his actual needs and the needs of his dependents on Yom al-Eid. So you take myself, Farid Dingle. Who do I have to support? I have to support myself. I have to support my family, my wife, my 3 kids. No one else. Excuse me. So do you have enough money to pay rent for today? Yes. Do you have enough money for food today? Do you have money for basic needs of today? And in reality, the basic needs of Eid is not the same as normal. So for example, it would be normal to have some kind of dessert on Eid. It would be normal, for example, to do some kind of special thing, right? Depending on urf and aada, what's normally done. Suppose your family is not Muslim, can you pay them zakat? No, you cannot. The only non-Muslim who can receive zakat is an accountant for zakat, established by the Muslim ruler. So imagine, for example, just like, in Saudi they needed some German engineers to work on the haram, right? Imagine they have this super complex system of zakat and they need some software engineer to work on the accounting system from Germany. He's non-Muslim. So you can do that. So the accountant who is appointed by the Muslim ruler to distribute zakat, he can receive zakat. He is one of the zakat, the 8 categories that receive zakat, the zakat worker, right? So in that scenario you could. That's the only category that can receive zakat. Otherwise, the poor Muslims receive zakat, right? Traveling Muslims receive zakat, etc. Right? Debtors who are Muslim, right? But otherwise, by default, you can't give to non-Muslims. So it's not a particular date, Omar. It's from the point that you got that money. So from the point that you receive that money. So let's say, for example, I get $10,000, stimulus check, right? Classic scenario. Don't even need it. Alhamdulillah, doing well anyway. You got all this money and you just sits there. At the end of the year, you still have it. So you're going to pay zakat on that. But 2 weeks after receiving that money, you also bought a car that you're going to sell. And you didn't sell it until the next year. So you're going to pay, each thing will have its own date. Each money will have its own date. And after that, you thought, well, California is getting hot, let's buy some camels, right? I had one of my students online 10 years ago maybe. He was a Californian camel farmer. I was like, fantastic, that's amazing, right? And so you bought some camels. Everything's going to have its own date in principle, right? And so what you can do, what's a handy thing to do, is to pay early, right? So you can pay zakat early on everything. But otherwise, everything will have its own date. Does that make sense, Omar? So instead of kind of avoiding the difficulty of like, well, hang on a minute, every single time money comes into me, I'm going to have to pay zakat on that a year later. It's a bit annoying. You just pay something on time and other things early, and you're done. Right? Okay. Khair. So it says on zakat al-fitr, you look at yourself. Who do you have to support? Yourself, your wife, your children, your parents, if they don't have enough money to support themselves, their offspring and their dependents, if they don't have enough money. If your parents don't have enough money to support their own dependents, then the dependents of your dependents are your dependents, if that makes sense, right? So imagine, for example, my dad, theoretically, my dad gets married, okay, to 3 women, okay, and they each have 9 children. And my dad cannot support them, so I have to support my dad, and I'm going to pay on zakat on Eid al-Fitr. I'm going to pay zakat for myself, my wife, my 3 children, and I pay zakat al-Fitr for my dad, his 3 wives, and his 24 children. But normally his 24 children are not; they're all independent. They're my brother. I don't have to pay zakat. I don't have to support my brother or sister, right? By default, I only have to support my brother and sister if they have to be supported by my father and he can't afford to support them because he himself is poor. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? Yahya, Suwabir, Shahid. Okay, so it says zakat al-fitr has to be paid by every Muslim who possesses more than his actual needs. So again, we were saying on Eid, you look at your actual needs. What are your actual needs on Eid? Your actual needs on Eid are going to be more than normal, because we're going to look at what is needed on Eid. And when we say need, we're not talking about basic fundamental needs. We're talking about what's normal on that day. So, for example, do you normally need a fridge? Yes. Do you normally need an oven? Yes. Do you normally need a window? Yes. Do you normally need a car? Yes. Okay, on Eid, what else do you need? Well, I need some presents. Right? I don't need something super, but like what's normally done on Eid is some kind of gift, some kind of celebration, a cake, something a bit special. So it's going to increase by a certain amount. So if you do not have that amount, as many people don't have on Eid, right? Even if they celebrate Eid anyway, but they don't actually have that money to celebrate Eid, right? Then they're not going to be. Then they are not. What's it called? Then they're not obliged to pay zakat. Right? They're not obliged to pay zakat. Its amount is 4 muds of the Prophet ﷺ, a sa', right? Which is right 4 times 0.51 liters of staple crops eaten in one's region. So I say, what is the staple crop of Jordan? You say bread. What is the staple crop of California? I don't know, but presumably bread is the main. I don't even know what that even means in a super consumer society when you have people don't like eat bare minimum food. There's not like but traditionally, let's say for example, in Hispanic world, it'd be like maize is a key thing. Rice in China, rice in India, these kind of things, right? So Allahu A'lam, I don't even know what you do here. But important thing to note, in the Shafi'i school and the Maliki school and the Hanbali school, we cannot give the monetary equivalent. We have to give the main staple itself. So you live in a place where people eat rice, you have to give rice, you cannot give cash. You live in a place where people eat wheat, you have to give wheat. You can't even give flour, you have to give wheat. Right? You can't give cooked rice, you have to give the rice, as here's a bag of rice. Right? And so, practically speaking, everybody follows the Hanafi school. Everybody. Even Saudis, for example, who are kind of nominally Hanbali, they follow the Hanafi school, which is as long as, they just give the monetary equivalent. So they say estimation, for example, again here in California, they put the estimation very high. It's probably more like $2, but they put, let's say, $10. You're going to give $10 per head. So, myself, for example, $50, something like that, right? $60, depending how they estimate it. But they're going to estimate what is the if to buy a 2-liter bottle, if you get a 2-liter bottle or filled it with rice, how much would that cost? How much would it cost to buy that much rice, right? Now, if you live in an area, and I remember Shaykh Abdul Karim Yahya, he's here in America. I think he's in Chicago or Detroit or something like that. He was like, yeah, there are a lot of people who would accept rice, and so if you went and give them a bag of rice, they'd be like, thank you very much, right? Like there are people struggling, many people who are struggling, Muslims, and you go and give them a big bag of rice, and that's perfectly fine, right? And that would be better wherever it's practical, right? If it's still practical to give food, you should do that, because you're fulfilling the responsibility according to majority opinion. But in the scenario where it's just a joke, right? Where again, for where I was in Jordan, it's like, yeah, there are people who give rice too, but everybody's just trying to pay the rent and pay the electricity bills. And it's like nobody wants like a bag no one's even seen a bag of wheat in their life, right? They wouldn't know what that is. So it's not very useful when it's kind of just of no benefit whatsoever, right? And so it's nice to be very romantic and kind of like, quixotically like follow the madhab to the T, but when it's really clearly not practical and people need money and there is a position within the 4 madhabs, you should just do that. Even for example, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Hito, who's a very, very, very advanced Shafi scholar and very, very muta'assib. He's like very, very strict Shafi. He does that. He just pays, he's in Kuwait, just pays the money, doesn't give grain. Allahu alam. Or you give both, give grain and money, right? Khair. Intention is required. So when you give zakat, you have to intend, right? So somebody, for example, steals your money. In the Hanbali school, the Hanafi school, you can pay cash. So the Hanafi school, general thing in the Hanafi school is whenever there's a kafara or an expiation, you can give that thing, or you can give the monetary equivalent. Right, which is quite a useful dispensation, right? Okay, so the intention is required for all of these things. So when you're giving this money, so let's say for example, I gave some sadaqah, and then I realized I didn't actually have that much money. And then I realized that zakat is due. I said, you know what, I'm just going to retrospectively turn that sadaqah into zakat. You can't do that, doesn't count. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are only by intentions. You have to intend when you are giving that money or you are setting that money aside. Let's say for example, you had some gold in your house and you I'm putting it in my zakat box to give to the poor, right? And then somebody came and collected it before I intended, that's fine. But the point is you intended when you separated it, intended when you gave it to the agent, intended when you clicked that button that this is zakat, right? And often when we do it online, it says zakat or sadaqah, we make that distinction anyway, right? But you have to intend. This is not sadaqah, this is me giving money to somebody to whom it belongs. I'm not giving charity here. It is not permitted to give zakat or zakat al-fitr except to a Muslim who fits into one of the 8 categories, such as being poor or destitute, and there are other things, right? So practically speaking, find people who are poor and they do not have the means, they don't have the income for their basic needs, meaning, and again when I say, I don't mean poverty level, I'm talking about you can't buy a fridge. So again, if you live in the West, you don't have a fridge, like is that by choice or is it you can't afford it? No, I can't afford a fridge. Alhamdulillah, it's fine, but it's like you need a fridge. right? You need a door. Okay, but what if, so poverty in reality is relative. Poverty is relative. We're not talking about poverty line, like are you surviving or not? Do you have access to basic water and things? We're not talking about that. We're talking about, do you have basic things that normal people need? Do you have a fridge? Do you have a door? Do you have an oven? Do you have a car? So why can't you walk to work? It's only 1 hour walk. It's, yeah, it's not normal for me to walk 1 hour to work. That's not normal. That's considered difficult. Whereas somebody's like, yeah, what do you mean 1 hour? I walk 2 hours every day taking my sheep to the valley. What's your problem? Right? And so poverty is relative. Right? It's relative. There is dire poverty, meaning people are dying. They don't have access to water. They don't have access, proper sanitation. They don't have basic calories. Right? We're not talking about that. When we say poor, meaning you don't have the basic needs that a normal person needs given your background, given what's going on, right? Without going to extremes. Oh, I can't buy the new Xbox, therefore I'm poor. I don't have 5 cars. No, that's ridiculous. So if you live in a Hollywood lifestyle and you can't afford to live a super Hollywood lifestyle, that's not poor, but saying normal things that normal people need. Right? So a poor or destitute person and is not a Hashimite or a Muttalibite, right? Meaning you're not from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Someone who's Ahl Bayt, someone who's family of the Prophet ﷺ, they cannot receive zakat. Nor they're freed slaves, right? So in Islam, we don't have time to talk about this in detail. In Islam, somebody who is a freed slave is part of that family. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Wala." What is it? لحمة كلحمة الرحم or كما قال, right? So the Prophet ﷺ said that wala, when you free a slave, they are part of your family. They are part of your clan. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ said that loyalty, that clan loyalty that you get from freeing somebody is like a piece of meat, like the meat of the womb. It's like a family. So what happens when you free somebody? Then, for example, they accidentally kill somebody, right? So, for example, Amir he was owned by my family, and we set him free, and he accidentally kills somebody. We pay his blood money because we are his clan, right? And similarly, if he was a woman, for example, and he doesn't have anybody to marry him off, we marry him off, right? Because he's part of our clan. So that's what it means. Somebody who has become as part of the Ahl Bayt through what's called wala, through being freed slaves, right? Slavery doesn't exist anymore, but just a theoretical discussion. But it's important to understand, right? The idea of slavery in the Western experiment and the way that we used to in Islam is very, very different, right? Yeah, it means you are owned, you are a human being who does not have freedom, which is a fundamental, that's a fundamental difference. Like, wow, that's pretty big. But at the same time, you are still a human being. You still have dignity. You still have it's a tie. It's about being part of a family, right? Even in the Old Testament, we see that, for example, in the Old Testament, what is it? The covenant with Abraham, right? It applies to his sons and any boys that they buy. So people would do this. You would buy people to be part of your clan because you needed people to strengthen yourselves. So the covenant with Sayyidina Ibrahim, as mentioned in the Bible, in the Old Testament, applied to him and any of the boys that they bought. They also had to be circumcised. And notice the idea that you're buying somebody. Yeah, it's like, whoa, that's crazy. How can you buy somebody? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're dirt or mere property. They're part of your family. And so that covenant applied to these people. They were considered children of Israel, right? So that's same kind of idea. Anyway, it's a long discussion. We don't have time to talk about it here. But anyway, somebody who is a freed slave from Ahl Bayt, then they also cannot receive zakat because they're too noble to receive zakat. It is necessary to pay all of these groups. So in the Shafi'i school, by default, there are 8 categories. You have to give to 8 categories. That's the default, right? So imagine, for example, I live in Brentwood in California. Imagine there is 8 categories that existed. There are poor people and Muslim travelers and debtors and this and that and all the different 8 categories that exist. I have to give to each of the 8 categories. I can't just give to one. Right? And so 3 points which I want to mention is famine. So what's zakat got to do with famine? Nothing. They're two different things. So you cannot give zakat money in principle to a non-Muslim country experiencing famine. You can't do that. You live in, for example, Ethiopia and you're a Muslim and there is a Christian area that's undergoing a famine. You can't give them zakat. Okay, but what do you do then? But there is a communal obligation to save people from famine, or save people from an earthquake, or save people from whatever things they're going through, right? Humanitarian crisis. So if there's a humanitarian crisis, it is the communal obligation of the Muslims to solve that or make sure that humanitarian crisis is being solved. Somehow, right? That has to happen, right? Through lending them money, giving them money, whatever it is, humanitarian crisis, it has to be solved, right? If it can only be solved through zakat, it's possible that you could use zakat, but I'm not 100% sure that that's something else. But the default is no. Zakat is one thing, it's from Muslims to Muslims. But there is something that's called sadaqah and there's something called humanitarian aid, which is a communal obligation that has to happen. If somebody is dying, they have to be saved, right? Simple as that, whoever they are, Muslim or non-Muslim. The other thing we mentioned was family, right? It's a good idea to give zakat to your family. Why? Because you get two rewards. You get the reward of the zakat, you also get the reward of keeping family ties, and also you know exactly what's going on, right? You know exactly what's going on. You know, okay, this year I'm going to give you zakat, next year I'm not going to give you zakat because alhamdulillah, you're not actually eligible this year. It's a good idea, it's a good thing to do, right? And as we mentioned, in the Shafi'i school, not in the Hanafi school, but in the Shafi'i school, you can give zakat to your husband, right? He's lost his job, he can't meet the payments on the house, and you're paying alhamdulillah, you're a very wealthy woman, you pay your zakat to your husband. Right? And it's perfectly fine that he's now paying for the house that you're living, or he's paying for the food that you eat. It's perfectly fine, right? Giving zakat abroad. So the default in the Shafi'i school is you cannot give zakat abroad. You cannot give it outside of your city. Zakat is the whole purpose is there are Muslims who are watching Yahya drive down the street in his Mercedes and they feel heartbroken, they can't even buy a car. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to save their heartbreak, give them some of your money. That's the point, is that we are one community, support the people in your community. That's the whole point, right? And so that's the default. However, particularly living in the West, we often look that, yes, there are people in our community that need money, but there's people in dire straits, and I can't give them my charity, but I will give them my zakat, right? And so somebody, often it's better to give abroad, right? Even though that's not the Shafi'i school per se, but because there are positions within the Shafi'i school that do allow it, right? So there are positions that in the default, as I mentioned, it has to be to all 8 categories in your city. But there are positions that allow you to give to just one category, and in fact to just one person, and in fact even outside of the country. So that means, for example, could you give all of your zakat to your aunt in Jamaica or in Kathmandu or something like that? Yes, that is a valid position, right? You can do that, particularly if it's not very much, right? Let's say it's going to be like a couple $100. Like, if I divide this up, I can't really send anything to her. Whereas, can I just send it all to her? Yes, you can. That is a valid position, but the default position in the Shafi'i school is what? It has to be in your locality, meaning if you live in a village, it has to be in that village. If you live in a city, it has to be in that city, right? If the category is so if there are Muslims there, that's where you're going to give it, right? That's where you're going to give it. And we mentioned famine, and we mentioned family, and we mentioned giving abroad. Okay. Any questions or queries? Apologies, I went over time today, but. Go ahead, Nadir. Yeah. Now, do you want me to respond privately as well? Because if that's the case, it will be difficult. Okay, خير إن شاء الله. Okay, Imran, your dad is Amr? Okay, mashallah. Please give my salams. Where are you guys right now? You're in Qatar? Ireland. Okay, alhamdulillah. Khair, inshallah. Yeah, please give my salam, inshallah. Okay, جزاكم خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. سبحان الله بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.